Hey peeps, it's your boy Ruben here, bringing you another episode of Into the Movieverse. In today's episode, we discuss the action-packed spy movie, The Kingsman, directed by Matthew Vaughn, which initially released in December 2021 and acts as a prequel to the 2014 and 2017 movies of similar names, Kingsman: The Secret Service and Kingsman: The Golden Circle. So if you haven't seen those two movies yet, I strongly recommend you check them out. The movie takes place during the events of World War One between the Central Powers and the Allied forces, as the would-be Kingsmen try to discover the key players manipulating the direction of the war from behind the scenes. We discuss many things, including the characters and how they're utilized, the soundtrack, the different plot lines, and as I said, much more. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and without further ado, let's get stuck into the Movieverse. Yeah, man. So, about this movie, did you guys actually manage to follow the entire plot start to finish? Because I was having a bit of difficulty.
I knew straight away when they started doing the exposition into the history of the World War and the three kings and they're all brothers, and I was like, is this true? Is this, because I was like, is this an actual, because I know nothing about history. I was like, is this based on some loose truth, or are they just making this up? Because it looked quite comedic, and I know Kingsman has that, but I was just like, this is weird.
The thing is from what I know, is actually the history is actually quite accurate. Funnily enough, they took the actual history and turned it into their own funny little stories. They took some liberties with it, but I think overall it was actually quite historically accurate, which I'm quite impressed by.
They
my head.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, as Subi was saying, I think they use real life events and figures, obviously like Franz Ferdinand, the Tsar, Rasputin. They're obviously all real people in history, which were conducive to the whole world, the First World War. I think going back to what Ruben said about, and sort of Cam, about this being a little bit incomprehensible in terms of the exposition, that there's just mountains and mountains of it. The overarching story, I think it has issues with the structure. What I did like about this movie is the personal story with, I don't really remember their names, but I remember Ralph Fiennes, his squad who initiated the whole Kingsman agenda. But that personal story did touch me. I felt it had a lot of heart, and it was very tragic as well, which is what sort of drew me into it. I actually watched this film twice because the second half of the movie, the first half of the movie kind of had me at arm's length. I was kind of subconsciously watching it, when you've got something else on your mind. But then after a certain midway point, that's when I got drawn in. Exactly. So I watched it again and actually enjoyed it the second time because I felt more invested the second time.
You see, my issue with the film, and it wasn't a negative experience, my issue was it kind of felt like I was looking at three different screens and not knowing which screen to look at throughout the film. So you had like you're saying, you had the emotional plot with the son and Conrad. That was one kind of main plot line. Then you had the historical reference to history about the war, and then you kind of had as an underlying factor which didn't really kind of pop its head up until the end, the kind of origins of the Kingsman, which obviously leads into the future movies. So I was quite invested in obviously the emotional side of it throughout about the son, and when he got taken out, for me it was just kind of maybe I just felt like the dad, and I was like, man, there's nothing left for me to do here. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you guys felt the same, but after his son got taken out, I kind of just felt like the emotional part of the story, which was a big driving force behind it, just got removed, and now all that was left was action sequences. For me anyway. I'm not sure if you guys felt similar.
Yeah, I felt it because most of the first half of the movie is more about the relationship between Conrad and his father, and when you get to the halfway point and Conrad gets taken out, he's just like, well, he's just gonna be despair for the rest of the movie now, isn't he? He's just
it was three quarters of the movie.
So you guys actually were more sort of invested in Conrad than his father, because I actually wasn't really interested in Conrad. Obviously, there was a bit where the whole scuffle in No Man's Land, where I was like really getting into it, because again the choreography, we'll go more into this, but the choreography and the action set pieces were incredible. That's the kind of thing, that's the drawing point for me. But I was actually fully behind Ralph Fiennes' character, because I empathized with him, or sympathized more with his struggles than the actual son.
I'm actually saying that behind for me, because while I did care about Conrad, and like you said, it did feel like I think a bit of an emotional weight just left in the last half. But I think it was also important because it's what made Ralph Fiennes' character finally, go back to his kind of non-pacifist ways.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was quite important.
You see, my only problem with that subs is that we didn't get Conrad was the character that had all of the character development. The dad didn't. So when you say like, oh, we're getting to see him kind of go back to his non-pacifist ways, I've got nothing. I felt like I had nothing to kind of contrast that with, because we don't really see him before the birth of his son, like the stuff that he does. So it's kind of, does that make sense? Like,
well, you see him lose his wife though. You see him lose his wife. He has to raise a son on his own.
But that's it though. I mean, and then we get one flashback of him like in the war, but I didn't feel an emotional attachment to the character. I would have liked a bit more backstory for him.
With what you lot are saying, I actually had the opposite view. I was losing interest in this movie up until he got taken out, to be honest.
Exactly, that was the same thing for me.
I was getting really bored of the movie. I was looking at the clock, and then when man just got capped out, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Apart from the action set pieces that you saw a bit of before that, like in the No Man's Land part, I was getting bored. That actually woke me up again and made me take an interest in the movie.
Because you're wondering where is it going to go now, because he was supposed to be the hero. He was supposed to be the one who had this mission to get, I don't know, what was that pendant or that thing that was given to him by the spy? But yeah, you were like in your mind, you're like, oh, so now the story begins. Like now we find out what he's trying to accomplish, and then he just gets taken out. So you're like, okay, now what's left?
For me, I was actually sort of waiting for it, because this whole movie he's adamant he wants to go in the war. He wants to go in the war. And I was like, he's just gonna get himself killed, isn't he? And then when it happens, like, well,
didn't expect it to happen like that.
No, exactly.
I wasn't expecting like that.
That was cold, man. I'm not gonna lie, that was cold, man. The way you got snuffed like that, and the circumstances. I don't want to give too much away, but the circumstances.
It was shocking.
Yeah,
it was really shocking,
like,
and it was unexpected. They done a good job of making it unexpected.
Yeah.
But I think for me, usually when a movie does that, you have multiple points in the film that does that. But this just kind of came. It was like the only point in the movie that made you say, "Oh, like crap."
Like, that was it. Was so out of the blue. It was just like, okay. I was like, because you thought that this was gonna be like a main cat. He was a main character.
Yeah, exactly.
He was the main character.
And he just get headshot like that.
That's what I'm saying. I was expecting to get killed, but I was expecting it to happen more towards the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Well, so it did shock me at that point, but I was expecting to die at some point in this movie.
Yeah.
Because that's what war is.
Yeah, it was slightly jarring as well in a way that it turned into like a spy / kind of adventure at the beginning, and then it just turned into a war movie in the middle. It kind of, the pacing was a bit too quick at times, where it just like tried to, move on to the next thing way too quickly. I mean, not to say that I didn't enjoy that bit, because I did enjoy the little war bit. It was actually quite well done, but yeah, it was just a bit too fast for my liking, and just everything just changed so quickly for me.
Yeah. Moving on to the characters just quickly. So I think for me, because you guys were like, oh, you were invested in Conrad's story. For me, I felt like I can't remember the name of the actor, but I don't know if you guys know, but he was acting alongside these legends. Like you've got Ralph Fiennes, you've got Rhys Ifans, Shimon Hanzu, and they were just acting circles around him. So like he was a bit flat. I don't know if you guys agree with me. Like he wasn't bad, but he was just a bit too flat. So I think that's why I couldn't really get invested in his story. Conrad.
The guy who played like
his son, the guy who played his son, Ralph Fiennes' son.
Oh, his son. Oh, right. Yeah. He definitely came across a bit bland, a bit like just kind of like the whiny son you get in movies, kind of thing. And I think I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, because they wanted.
For me, it was just because everybody else was so good. Like the guy who played Rasputin, Rhys Ifans, he was just killing every
Oh,
scene.
yeah.
Like every scene he was
100%.
doing.
I think he's the best character for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So
yeah.
good.
Like the scene with the
Sorry,
leg.
Can we just can someone explain that to me? Because why was he licking out man's leg? I don't understand. Is that something?
Oh,
is that
man.
something Rasputin did?
He was the thing. He was like a witch
I think
doctor.
so.
He was like
And I'm
a
not
priest
sure
or a
how it
witch
fixed
doctor.
his leg either, which is kind of weird.
That's what I'm saying, because it healed him
Yeah.
as well. I was
didn't
like,
get that.
are
At
we
one
going into
at one point, I was thinking maybe he spiked him with opium and it was going to be temporary, but then it just was fixed for the whole movie, and I was like, okay, there's some magic. There's some magic in this, bro.
Because that was another problem I had with this movie. It just randomly
Yeah.
just pulls out some mystical
can't-
stuff
you
and
couldn't-
fixed his leg
You couldn't
with
take
him
it
licking
seriously.
it out and stuff. And guys
Yeah, and
was a cold bath and that.
Yeah, and then the whole part where Ralph Fiennes was basically just telling the truth. It was like, well, what happened? What did we miss? Did he spike him? Where's this coming from?
Yeah.
Did he hypnotize the man?
Funny story about Ralph. What's his name? Ralph Fiennes.
Ralph Fiennes.
Oh,
Yeah. Did you guys? Maybe it was just me, but did you guys know that he played Voldemort in Harry Potter?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I had no idea.
He's an amazing
And-
actor. I don't care. He's very withdrawn, but he's
Wait.
still very like dignified, like
Me-
noble.
me-
He has all those. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, me and the missus were watching it, and she randomly says, "Ruben, that guy plays Voldemort," and I was like, "What?" Like, yeah, that's Voldemort. I was like, "How on earth did you come to that conclusion?" It's his teeth. I recognize his teeth. I'm like, "Nah, how you recognize his teeth?"
His teeth, you know. Wow.
Oh,
Talking about the characters, what did you think of the main villain of this movie? Was it Morton?
Oh,
I thought it was horrible. I thought it was horrible.
Yeah.
I thought it
he was chewing the
He
scenery.
was
He
terrible.
was chewing the scenery. I mean, I feel like, because I wanted to add, that this movie kind of draws parallels with certain political things that are happening right now. You know, obviously involving a certain dictator. So I kind of like, even though he was cartoonish, dude, like what we're living through right now isn't that far removed from what happens in this movie. Do you know what I'm saying? So, boy, as bad as he is.
I feel like the whole, like, you know, the fact that they hid his identity for the whole movie kind of made it obvious.
Yeah.
And it was a bit unnecessary. It was like it just like he's just living on top of this mountain, just angry at England for whatever reason. It just seemed so tapped on at the end. Like it seemed like it was a side note of this whole thing.
For me, it was actually quite surprising who it was.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't really care who it was.
Yeah.
It's such a fun character.
This is
So
it.
it was a weird little twist. That's
Well,
not really a twist.
the reason I thought it was obvious who it was is because they hid his identity.
Yeah.
Because-
Oh, really?
and who they had, it was like, well, if they hid his identity, that means they didn't want us to know. So it must be a notable person that we've already seen. And the only person that could have been was either
who he is,
Charles Dance's character or his sidekick. And Charles Dance's character died, so...
But
There's
usually,
no other actors, because usually you have a major actor playing the villain.
Exactly.
So-
Or even if there is going to be a big reveal, usually it's a character who has a lot more screen time.
He's been
No.
fairly.
Yeah.
And the only other ones it couldn't have been anyone else basically because we hadn't seen anyone else. Everyone knew was either on the team or
For me, it wasn't really believable for me because throughout this movie, you're seeing clips of this man on this cliff. When has he got time to go there? He's working. He's got a job, but how has he got time to go to this cliff to send man on missions?
In the early 90s, how's he getting to and fro, bro? They got one rickety lift that goes up and down that mountain in the middle of nowhere. It just seemed a bit.
Yeah, it's a bit wacky. That's the thing about these movies. Like, they're just all over the place tonally. Like, you've got serious moments, and then you've just got stupid moments that just are really confusing or dumb, silly.
I like the wackiness about it because I think the first Kingsman, which is my favorite movie, I love the first thing. And the wackiness nature of it, but it didn't feel like it was, like the first villain, like Samuel L. Jackson's one, I thought was a great villain and it was wacky.
Yeah.
It played on all the spy tropes and all of that. And I know they tried to do a similar thing here with the wackiness, and I think they just missed the mark in terms of getting a villain that I actually even cared about, because they had no meeting with him up until that point. There was no real chemistry between them either. It was just a generic bad guy doing a generic bad thing, and they're just there to stop him.
And even
because I think they focused.
No, I was gonna say, and even like his crew, like his followers that were around that table, like you don't really care too much. Obviously, besides like the main guy who I don't know, I can't remember his name. The rest of them were just kind of bland, and I'm not even sure you even get to see all of them in action. You only see 3 or 4 of them who have their rings.
They were in it quite quickly. I think they wasted Daniel Bruhl's character because that guy's such an amazing actor.
He is.
We didn't really have to do that film.
Yeah, I assumed that they were hoping that there was going to be a sequel on that, because he survived at the end and he started moving on to. So I think they're hoping that they could use him in a sequel.
Yeah, that's true, because they
the only
did
reason why you
foreshadow.
don't use him in the movie when you put him in.
Yeah.
That you're hoping to use him in the next one. That's the only
They
thing I can think of.
they foreshadowed obviously Hitler, so because he was obviously trying to manipulate the German Kaiser, so obviously it would make sense for him to then move on to Hitler, and if they do decide to make a sequel prequel, then that would be the obvious route, I'd say, with Daniel Bruhl being a more significant character in that one.
I hear that.
So I mean, did you guys want to talk about like the action or like the choreography? Cause
the action sequences were on point.
Incredible,
I found those fun.
Yeah.
I found those fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely.
And especially, I thought all of the action sequences were great. The last action sequence, a lot of movies aren't very good at making like the blows seem believable, but with this one, every punch, every swing of a sword, you can feel the impact of every. I think the choreography in all 3 of the Kingsman movies, I think that is, you can see where they focused and make sure, let's get this on point, because I thought the choreography was great. There weren't many cuts as well, because obviously a lot of action movies now, they're cut to hell and keep cutting them, because obviously they have to cut out the stunt doubles, but it seemed like it was a lot more seamless than in other action movies. I thought the action was on point, and it's the best part of this movie by far.
And not just that.
One of my favorite moments in that thing was the Rasputin's fight.
Yeah,
the way his fighting style and his the way he does his Russian dance and all this kind of stuff. It's just such a cool way to incorporate that into a fight style. It's just so much fun to watch.
And the direction as well. The camera work is just incredible. The way I think it's Mark Miller. He's the director, right? The way he positions the camera in certain shots.
Matthew Vaughn, isn't it?
Is it Matthew Vaughn? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, he's the one who did the comics. Matthew Vaughn, yeah, you're right, CV. There's certain times where the camera's just flying through the shot, where he sort of shoots the torpedo through the sub. And then there's scenes where they put the camera on the sword while they're fighting.
I was about to say that. When it goes into first person view, during the last fight scene, and you see the sword, I was like, oh!
Yeah, it really puts you in the middle of the action, so you feel like you're just in the heat of it. It's just really engulfing, man.
It's to be expected, because all the Kingsman movies so far, they've been filmed brilliantly. They focus on the correct
even though I didn't like the second one, it was actually the choreography and the fighting was actually quite enjoyable, as you said,
definitely. Yeah, man.
Was there anything on the soundtrack that stood out for any of you?
I mean, the music did have a good sort of fanfare to it. It was, it was very very appropriate, because obviously this is like an origin story, and it shows how these underdogs, I'd say, because obviously they were swamped. In the exposition, they're showing how they're basically losing the war, and these underdogs are the ones who turn the tide of the war. So that kind of heroic music really kind of rouses you into the scenes, the scenes where they're fighting, and they're basically, you don't know whether things are gonna work out or not. So the music does play a big part.
Yeah, I think it just kind of reflected that kind of obviously that kind of old like Britannia kind of atmosphere, and then obviously contrasting with the bits of the war as well, to kind of make it a bit more dramatic. I definitely think they've done a good job of that, and it kind of lets you feel the tension throughout all of the war scenes, especially during the shooting bits, the part where they're reciting that poem, all those bits you just kind of start to feel it, and it makes it made me think back to school, because I was like, man, I remember hearing I don't know if it was in school when I heard that poem that they were reciting, but it just kind of made me just think, that kind of nostalgia when I was watching it, and I think it's traditionally when you've got a good movie about like a war, it should do that. It should give you that sense of nostalgia about what you've learned throughout history. You should be able to take away something, and it should feel familiar, like a familiarity about it. I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought I'd be watching a war movie and actually like be on the edge of my seat, because most war well, I mean, I'm not gonna say most war movies, but I know there's a lot of war movies where you're just kind of like half in, half out. But this one was
I don't know if
really
that really
good.
count as a war film though. It was only the main
Yeah,
war.
'cause that was
only-
on.
yeah.
It was a small part of the movie, really. I mean, even though it was about the whole
Yeah.
war, a very small part was actually on the battlefield. With regards to the soundtrack, for me, I mean, I didn't really take much away from the soundtrack. I didn't think it was bad, and I think it suited the movie very well. But it's not something that stood out to me as much as other movies in the past. But I think it was clearly tonally effective, and the fact that I guess I didn't take much from it means it wasn't terrible. But just not my cup of tea. But I didn't have anything bad to say about the soundtrack.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
for
agreed. Like soundtrack wise, I did like it, but it wasn't anything truly special for me. But at the same time, it did act as a good storytelling device. So it did kind of immerse me in all the scenes and everything. So it did the job it wanted to do. But if I can mention something that I really enjoyed about the film is I really liked the set designs and the costume designs, just the way they've dressed everyone, and I think that was just really well done. If there's anything you can mention, if you guys noticed anything with the costume stuff that you liked.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was historically accurate. Yeah, pretty cool. I mean, obviously you could tell which part of the Europe, or which part of the world you were in based on the way they were dressed. Obviously, whether it was Russia, Germany, England. So that was pretty spot on, I'd say. And going back to the set design, I didn't really think about it at the time, but yeah, the sets are really elaborate. Like, they show inside the president's office, inside the I don't know what's the that palace. So it's like really intricate, the decorations and whatnot. And you're saying about the mountain. Obviously, even that mountain looked pretty cool. I mean, the
Mountain was
Really good.
the sort of establishing shots and whatnot, and the vistas
and those
were.
boats, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, bro. Speaking of goats, I want to say that goat was the goat, man. That goat. That goat.
Was that goat prompting him to grab on to pull him up, or was it trying to butt man? Was
trying to headbutt him.
man off the cliff? I'm not sure, bro. I don't know.
It was trying to headbutt
I was like, he's sending for man, and Serene was like, no, he's trying to prompt him to like grab onto his horn. I was like,
No, if you remember earlier in the movie, they actually did say that this goat likes to headbutt from you. So it was coming to knock him off the cliff.
Hey, that goat was a war hero, man. That goat should have been in the Kingsman agency as well, man.
That goat saved millions of lives.
Literally.
To be fair, he done more than Aaron Taylor Johnson's
Yeah.
character. I mean,
Yeah,
my man got into the Kingsman just to like swap tripping places with Conrad. That's his claim for getting into the Kingsman.
Yeah.
I was like, what's he doing there? Man's just
Speaking of which, I think I read something interesting is that apparently Aaron Taylor Johnson's supposed to be like Eggsy's like ancestor.
Oh, really?
From,
Okay.
Kingsman. Yeah, it's supposed to be like
okay.
ancestor or something, which is quite interesting. I thought it was an interesting thing to mention. Yeah.
Yeah. What did
Yeah, he did really
overall? Would you guys say you preferred this Kingsman or like the first Kingsman, as in the characters of the King? Because when they change up characters of a franchise that you like, it's hard to kind of really get behind the new characters, if that makes sense. So how would you guys say you felt in this regard, in this instance?
I don't really have a strong connection to any of the characters, if I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's always tricky when you're making like multiples of a movie, because you usually compare it to the first, and if the first one's really good, it's very hard to beat that. And I really liked the first Kingsman and Eggsy from the first hours. I loved everything about his character. I thought it was great. This one, I didn't really have that sort of attachment to any of them. It seemed like more by like any action movie, really. I wouldn't have any connection to.
Yeah, I think that with the first two movies, obviously when you're introduced to Eggsy and his upbringing, where he lives, all that stuff, even his accent, there's a lot of familiarity to take away, like especially probably for us being like Londoners. So I quite, I felt a connection to his character, but also all the other characters and the atmosphere and the setting throughout all the movies. Where with this one, because it's like a lot more historical based, it was hard to get that connection. It just, I think what Peter said the other day, it felt a bit like a history lesson, and that's kind of what it came across to me as well. It was more I'm looking back at a time rather than looking at something that I, an atmosphere or a scene or a setting that I've experienced myself. So that did make it a bit harder to draw a parallel and connection to, my own life that I've seen.
I think with the first Kingsman, what they did a great job with was they established the care for the characters much quicker than they did in this one, because they quickly established, Eggsy being from like that part of the neighborhood kind of thing, everything with his mom, his this abusive kind of stepdad, stealing a car, police car, all this kind of stuff. He's had a quite a tough life kind of thing. Everything in that first, I think, 20 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes, just really they just made you like the guy very, very quickly. And then everything that just came after, it just added on to liking him. Whereas in this one, I did watch in December, so I can't remember that well, but I just don't remember like caring it straight away.
Yeah,
it was only maybe
it is a bit slow at first. I do agree. It's a bit slow at first. Then before it kind of gets to the good stuff. But
I think the reason for that is because this is more. It feels more like a movie about a sheltered rich boy rather than something more down to earth that we can relate to.
That's true. Yeah.
Was the first one.
Yeah. No, I definitely get that.
Cool. So, did you guys want to get to ratings, or anything else you wanted to add before that?
Not much from me.
Yeah.
I did want to applaud some really creative ways they kind of explained some cool stuff about the first Kingsman. Like I really enjoyed the way he used the knives and the shoes to kind of climb up the mountain, and then that explained why they have knives in the shoes in the first film. And then I think they also explained stuff like "Manus maketh man," Oxford not brogues. All those little, I thought it was really creative.
Yeah, Easter eggs. Yeah.
And what about like all the? I can't remember like the specifics about the first two, but like the code names they used, was that of relevance to the first two movies at all?
Yeah. Merlin. It explains it came from Conrad calling all of his parents Knights of the Round Table, and that's where it all originated from. So it was nice to see where that explained as well. So I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Hey, so who wants to go first with the conclusion ratings?
So I mean, initially when I was watching this, as I said earlier, I wasn't really invested. I was kind of like watching it whilst doing other things, if I'm being honest, because it just didn't grab me. It was a bit too exposition heavy. But then, as I said, there was a point in the midway point where it's very poignant. It got very serious actually, and I was shocked. I was surprised by what unraveled, i.e. Conrad basically being killed before his time, and that's what drew me in. From then on, it was just like action sequence after action sequence, and because this guy went from a pacifist to regaining his call of his call to action, that really that really made me sort of more invested in this, made me more sympathetic towards the character. So overall I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. I watched it again. I watched it straight after, and I would actually watch it again. So I would say this is probably like a 7 out of 10 for me. Probably higher than most people would say, but I don't know, something about it just really drew me into it. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll be quick and brief. I'm not a massive fan. Well, I don't really watch like historical movies, especially like about war and stuff. They're not my general cup of tea. But yeah, I just think the way that they structured the movie in terms of like who the main character was and the direction they took. For me, it was the matter of fact of just either make it about the dad, make it about the son, or make it about the son and the dad like coming closer together, or uniting towards the end. I just felt like saving the part for the son to get capped off like 3/4 into the movie. It just really just made me feel like there's nothing really left for me to see here besides action sequences. So yeah, I wasn't a fan of the structure. I think it would have been a lot better for me personally if the son survived, if they made the son just the main character throughout, or if they just specifically focused on Ralph Fiennes' character. So the way that they just kind of put it in different directions, I didn't particularly like. So for me, I would give it a 5. Just something that I could just watch on TV, or even just like watch half it and turn it off. To be honest, I felt like I didn't even need to see the end. So for me, but yeah, I'm giving it a 5.
For me, I'd give it a 6. And that's mainly because it didn't really feel like a Kingsman movie compared to the last two. Where this could have been any part 1 movie of the Kingsman plot just tacked on the end. I understand that it's a prequel, but I feel like they could have gone into it more, like have it been established midway through the movie, and the first mission is obviously to save the world or whatever. But it felt more like it was just tacked on. So while it was enjoyable, it didn't really feel like a Kingsman movie. That's why I give it just a 6.
Who's it gonna be?
Yeah, so yeah, I can go. Yeah, so I actually had quite a blast in this film. I think maybe the fact that I watched it at the cinema with my friends aided in that, because we could kind of share the experience together, and certain scenes, like they'd gasp at that, the scene where Conrad, that thing happened, and then yeah, so stuff like that just kind of aided in the experience and made me enjoy it even more. So as I said during the review, like I enjoyed the actual how it went creative with explaining all the little bits of the first Kingsman movie, which I really love. So I really appreciated all the callbacks, stuff like that. The characters were fun. The choreography obviously is the main thing that kind of really made it enjoyable, and the directing of things. So just basing on all that and the fact that I watched at the cinema, I would actually give it the highest one here, which is a good 7.5 out of 10.
Ooh.
Cool.
Yeah, I had a nice blast with that one.
For that, Lawrence has been taking a shotgun, bro.
No. So I wouldn't watch this movie again. I have no interest in watching this movie again. I thought it started way too slow. I was getting bored until around the midpoint where we got into the no man's land scene and where you got capped. That's when I actually piqued my interest again, and I started getting invested again. But then I thought the ending of this was quite poor and weak as well in terms of the main villain. But I would give it points because I thought the action set pieces were great. Some of those callbacks to the original Kingsman movies were also good. I disagree with Cam where he says he doesn't think it was a Kingsman movie. I think it is a very Kingsman movie, or at least I think it was trying to be, in terms of how wacky some of the parts were. I just think they've done it very poorly. It seemed like it came a bit out of the blue, things like, the mystical licking the leg and fixing it and all that. That just was really weird. I can't get that out of my head. It was just so odd and so out of the blue. But so yeah, I think this movie, but what I do agree with Kevin, is all over the place. So I would give this a 5.5. I think it's more than average, probably a bit less than fine, but yeah, I wouldn't watch this movie again.
Wow.
Cool.
Right,
Yeah,
so
quite mixed on
the
this one.
scores are all over the place, man. It's like, I think it's the first movie we've done where we haven't really agreed, like nobody's really had, apart from Subi and me, we haven't really had like a what's the word, like overall agreeing, like a unanimous agreement.
Yeah.
To the
Our scores
rating.
reflect the movie, isn't it?
It's all over the place, yeah.
Well, so.
I mean, I think
That's what you focus on, really, is in terms of what you take out of it, in terms of what you like.
I think even though the setting is different from the first two movies, I was going to say, I think it still feels, because Matthew Vaughn is the name of the director, right? He has this like signature tonal whiplash in all his movies, where like you have like uber violent, there's loads of violence, but then you just have like some goofy comedic scenes that are like in the middle of those. So he has I feel like he has a problem balancing the tone of his movies. I suppose that's kind of his thing, but you can tell it's.
I think he done it excellently in the first.
Yeah.
He balanced it excellently in the first.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the problem, is that it's very difficult to do, and I just don't think he's like. The second one wasn't. He had a similar problem, and then this one, I think it was even worse, because I actually prefer the second one to this one.
Oh, no way.
Right. Oh, is it? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I disagree.
So there you have it, guys. Not our usual consensus, but there were some very interesting points raised, so we really hope you enjoyed the video as much as we did. If you have your own thoughts or opinions on the movie, please do drop them in the comment section below, as we would love to hear from you. And if you want to support our channel and what we do, please do subscribe and give us a thumbs up and share where possible. And we'll catch you next time as we dive even deeper into the Movieverse.